What is up? Welcome to Drip Drop Studios. This is another Chopping It Up with Motu Community Edition. So I'd like to welcome Isaac Belden, the founder of the Veterans Entrepreneurs Alliance, to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I love the VEA.
Me
I
too.
also love you.
And I love you.
Really a big reason for the community edition, the community series, is we have a lot of really amazing things going on in the Valley that I don't think a lot of people know about, right? And I think people know about it, but it's out of sight, out of mind, right? If you're not involved with it or knowing about it or have someone who is involved in it, right? You just don't know about it. And I think you have something so amazing that you're building at the VEA. That's super close to you and your heart and the soul and spirit of you and your family. And so I want to get into it, and I want to really show our viewers what's going on in the Valley, what you're doing for the community here, but not only just the community here. I know it's a national program as well, but what are we doing right here, home base, right here in the Valley, and what are you doing for that? But to get there, we got to go back in time.
Let's do it.
And so can you give our viewers a little just background on Isaac Belden, right? Because, we've done a podcast a long time ago where you kind of went through that, but I think for this, I definitely would love people to just take them back to where it started, where you went, how you got there, where we're at now. So
yeah, again, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
So my background, I'll start kind of with my childhood because I think it all just kind of builds on itself, right? So,
like all childhoods,
I grew up outside of Portland in a little town called Rockwood.
Yeah.
On 187th, and the street
I was like,
tried to deserve the numbers that it had assigned to it. Yeah. A lot of people assume that the first time I ever got shot at was in Iraq, but it wasn't. I was walking to Safeway with my friends when I was 13. So, a weird place to live. A weird place to live. We grew up poor. We didn't have much. A lot of times didn't really know where kind of that next meal or that next thing was coming from. I think that in hindsight really kind of shaped the person that I became.
Yeah.
And it did lead to my eventual enlistment in the military because I didn't have a lot of options.
Do you think that growing up that way, right, or poor and in communities where, do you think that shaping kind of you going to the military or just growing up, right? I'm a firm believer in like where we come from, right, kind of is the foundation of who we are, right? But from where you came from growing up in Rockwood, what kind of foundational bricks came from just there that you like learned life lessons that I got from the hood that like I ain't ever gonna shake?
An appreciation, I think, for everything that I have been able to build in my life. I mean, regardless of whether you grew up rich or poor, I mean, assholes are going to be assholes.
That is a true statement. True statement.
Comes from every walk of life. But I think that growing up hard definitely makes you look at the world a little differently.
Yeah.
And when you do achieve some level of what you might call success, I guess, or just being comfortable, it just means so much more to me than I think it would have had I not had to like struggle for it. So yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of veterans share kind of my same story, right? It's clearly not universally true. Nothing really is. But a lot of the veteran population comes from that background where they make the decision to join the military. And a lot of people think that it's all patriotism, right? And sometimes it is, and maybe that's a piece of it. But a lot of it is like, I don't have options, right? I'm not going to college. I don't really know what I want to do with my life. If I go to the military, it'll give me some direction. And if I decide I want to go to college, they're going to pay for it.
Yep.
Right. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
like kind of a
It's a
win-win.
win-win in that scenario.
Yeah. And that was me. I mean, I joined in March of 2001. And for anybody listening to this, I don't know if you heard, but shortly after that,
Yeah.
something really terrible happened. So I was a 17-year-old kid sitting in my high school English class, watching the TV and also watching across the street at the National Guard Armory as all these vehicles were rolling into the parking lot. And I'm a fresh, like brand new enlistee thinking, man, I'm getting sent to war. I'm
Yep.
17 years old. Like, what am I doing? Right. It didn't happen for a while. I didn't end up going until 2004, but
Oof. That must have been like such a, I don't know. I'm a firm believer that there are mindsets to go to war, or to have the mindset to pull the trigger, or to be that type of fighter,
right.
warrior in a sense. I feel like realistically, we send a lot of kids to war.
I was a
that
boy.
have
Like
no idea.
I was barely 21, but I still, I didn't know anything.
Yeah, we send so many kids to war. We did, right? That just have no idea what it's like to be a warrior or to be in that mindset. And I feel like I feel like there's a lot of repercussions, right?
Right.
From that, from sending very weak-minded individuals into combat and believing they're supposed to come back and all this, you should be just fine.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up mindset, because it's a weird place to be. And it's different for everybody. You get there and the reality of it can set in pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
Well,
you're
and
from freaking Idaho to Kuwait.
And there's no predicting who's going to be able to hack it and who's not.
Yep.
I saw some of the guys that were what by traditional standards would be the tough guys, like the guys that are just like, oh, they've got this, right? They broke. They were like, nope, no thank you, right? And then me.
Well, it's easy to be comfortable when you're here. It's when you're somewhere where it's you, like, and
then like, my experience, like growing up and everything, hard, but nothing like extreme violence or anything, right? So for me, I was a few months in when all of a sudden it's going to bed every night afraid, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. Mortar rounds flying overhead, landing in the fob, your vehicle's getting blown up, and you're just like, shit, how am I going to make it out of this? And then there's this moment, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, and like I said, it happens at different intervals for everybody, but there was this moment where it just clicked. And all of a sudden, it was like I was in this different place, like mentally, where it was like, this is what life is. Like, this is what happens. It's not scary. In some ways, it's exciting, right? Like, you've got this just adrenaline pumping, ready for anything. And then fast forward to when they send you home. Just like it was hard to turn it, like it didn't turn on right away, it's not going to turn off right away either. And that's what is really hard. And I personally believe takes so many veterans from us, whether it be takes their lives or takes their freedom, because they end up in situations where they might commit an act of violence, or they may get addicted to try to chase that high that ends up getting them incarcerated.
Oh, yeah. Incarceration. Yeah.
Oh, incarceration.
I feel like there's such a huge correlation. We've talked about it, right? Between like incarceration and unfortunately serving our country and being a part of the greatest freaking military force in the world. And it's unfortunate that there's a lot of correlation. But bro, for you to have gone what you've gone through, right? And have been in the battleground and had to turn it on, right? Mindset, figure it out. Like, and it's crazy, right? You say mindset in the sense of like, I had to figure out how this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy. There's people in this world that it is just normal. That's just life.
Yeah.
right? Gunshots, and I'm not talking about in America. I'm talking about in
The
the
third world.
world,
Yeah.
right? Where it's just normal, right? They live in war zones every day, and so that's why I've always said, like, man, it's tough to gab these youngsters, right? You can be 18 and serve our country. Now you have to be 21 to smoke cigarettes. I feel like they should move the target, but and these 18-year-old kids have no idea,
Mm-hmm.
none.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more.
And so back to your story. So you joined the military or enlisted, 17. 9/11 happens. Um, how long after that did you get sent over?
Yeah. So I joined in 2001. I got sent over in 2004. We trained up. We hit the ground late 2004, and Iraq.
Yeah.
So we hit the ground in Kuwait first.
Right. The green zone.
The green
Is that
zone
what you call it?
staging
The green
area.
zone?
Yeah. And just sat and waited until we could drive across the border and head to where we were going. And we were stationed on a little fob called Fob McHenry.
For those who have no idea what
a
FOB means.
forward operating base McHenry outside of Kirkuk, Iraq. And we were a little satellite fob. I don't remember how many of us were on there, but it was basically 4 dirt berms pushed up with some
Right.
towers on each corner, and lived in little chews. I can't remember what that's, something housing unit.
Shoe?
Chew, like CHU,
Oh.
something housing unit. They're Connex boxes that were
Turned
converted into
homes.
little housing units.
Yeah. Like
So-
bunks and
Yep.
gotcha.
Four guys to a room. Slept next to a fire pit, which that's a whole other thing.
We're in now.
Well, now there's this big thing called the what is it? The PACT Act, like where a bunch of people are popping up with weird cancers and all this other stuff because we lived next to these pits where they burned everything, batteries and food and trash.
It's called the what?
It's called the PACT Act. So where they're offering benefits now to veterans based on their exposure to fire pits, because they burned everything in that thing, and I could have spit at it. I could have hit it with a loogie from where I slept. Not literally, but just about.
You're in Kuwait. You're in the green zone. You're in your fob. What happens to get you that you're crossing out of the green zone? What do they call the zone when you're not in the green zone anymore? What's that called? The red zone?
The combat
zone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So jumped on our vehicles. We're driving, and it was kind of crazy because we kept on going out there and getting ready, right? And then it would be like, shit's too hot. Like,
Right.
push it back. Finally, we get the green light, so we take off, and it was minutes after we crossed the border into Iraq that our convoy got hit with our first vehicle-borne IED. And I remember I was driving the vehicle, and I remember looking out the window, and I won't specifically name all the body parts, but there were
Right.
some body parts that were just sitting there on the road, and I just remember thinking, like, holy shit.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, what am I doing? Like,
Oh, you in the war zone now.
what am I doing? And that's where the fear started, right? Like the adrenaline kind of overcomes it to
Yeah.
some degree, but then you're like, I'm just white knuckling that steering wheel the entire time, just like, if that's what just happened minutes in, like, what's coming later?
Exactly.
And so we get there, and we immediately start doing right seat rides where the people that were there are transitioning control over to us. So we start going on tours of the villages and going and assisting on raids of villages and things like that. Do a little bit of like shaking hands and kissing babies,
Yeah.
trying to get in the good graces of the people that did support us there.
Right.
Because as much as the news might want you to believe, not everybody over there hates us.
Right.
A lot of them are doing what they do out of necessity.
Yeah.
Like the real bad guys aren't the guys that are fighting us typically.
Right.
It's the people that the real bad guys are either threatening or paying to fight us.
Fight him. Yeah.
And so that transition was a little nutty. Like it's like drinking through a fire hose. And then, like I said, like at some point it just becomes second nature, and
Right.
first nature, really, I guess. But, and you just go.
That's freaking crazy.
Right.
That is crazy.
Well, it's insane to me to think about it now, because it's such a different part of your mind
Yeah.
that it almost doesn't feel like it was me. Like I
Yeah.
think back and I'm just like, how did I do that? Right.
I sometimes I'm in the same, like, sometimes I go back and right from my colorful past, and then I'm like, dang, I really did do that. What was I thinking? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, you just, like, it's not that it's hard for me to go back, like, and pull that dude out of retirement, right? Just like
Yeah.
it's not hard for you. Like, you've accessed it. Now you know, you can access it again if you needed to. But things that you do in those moments, or that you're not afraid of, or things you're willing to do, they could just, it blows our own minds. And,
Yeah, that shadow of kind of that former self is
Yeah.
always there,
Yeah.
right? But you need to know when it's appropriate to access it. You can't just go and do a bunch of hood rat shit with your friends all the time.
Well, exactly. But that's the part, right? I feel, and right, whether I'm right or wrong, or right, but I feel like I don't feel like we do enough to help people turn it off, or understand how to turn it off, or right. There's
refocus them.
Exactly.
Right.
Repurpose, in the sense of give them.
The
a
problem
new purpose.
is, you get them into this mindset, and then you just drop them back into the real world,
Yeah.
and expect them to integrate. Now,
Figure it out.
there's stuff, right? I mean, it's not that they don't provide services, but they don't really make the services, how do I say, they're available,
Accessible?
but you're not very well educated on the services. And
Yeah.
even if you do get educated on the services, sometimes it is extremely difficult to access the services,
Yeah.
right? So you come home, you go to I'll talk about my personal experience, right? So
Right.
while we were still in country, they came to us with these little handheld devices.
In this country or in Iraq?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
They came to us in Iraq, and they sat us all down, and they had these little handheld devices and asked us a bunch of questions like, are you having any troubles with this and any troubles with that? Do you have any injuries that are unresolved? Do you have, like, whatever it is, right? But then they also preface this question with, like, based on the way you answer these questions, you could be held at the base that we come back to. I think we demobbed at Fort Lewis in Washington. They're like, you could be held at Fort Lewis for up to, however long it takes to remedy these issues, right?
Right.
But if you just answer them, whatever, like, you can, when you get back to your home station, you can go to the VA and you can get help, right? Well, the problem with that is a lot of guys and gals, just veterans in general, they're not going to do that.
Right.
But the ones that do are often met with just so much red tape, and like, you need to do this, and you need to fill this out, and you need to take this here, and you need to do that. And it just becomes overwhelming for somebody that's already struggling and already kind of trying to figure out their way just in their everyday life. To have to manage all of this stuff with the VA can be incredibly overwhelming.
Yep.
And so a lot of us either don't do it, or we start the process, we get frustrated, we let our pride or whatever just get the best of us, and then we quit.
Yeah.
So then you're just out there flapping in the wind, trying to figure
it
it
out. Yeah.
And so I say that to say there's nothing, I'm not trying to villainize the VA. I'm not trying to villainize any of these programs that exist.
Right.
There just needs to, I've always believed that there needs to be a more, like, a friendly face, right? Or like a community-based,
or
meet you where you are, kind of go-between or solution, or the realization that the old way and the way it's always been done isn't always the right way. And if it was the right way, we wouldn't still be battling 22 deaths a day.
Yeah.
Right? So when I hear people like, well, why do we do that? Why do we do it like that? Well, it's because it's the way we've always done it.
But it ain't working.
But if it's not working, then why do we keep doing it that way? And so
Because that's what we've been doing.
I saw a big gap. Well, I guess I'll start with kind of where I started to pull it together. And really that was my first taste of entrepreneurship, right?
Well, before you get into that, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a piece of you coming back, right? And there's a before you have the taste of entrepreneurship, there's a gap there from coming back from Iraq, right? And then finding entrepreneurship, right? There's a that many vets go through, right?
Yeah.
And many are some still on that in that gap where right you got back and couldn't figure it out, right? A lot of people tell me, right, like when I got released from prison, like why, what did you do to change your life and want to be successful, right? And it's that gap that I had, right? I had choices to make in that gap,
Right.
And so in that gap where you came back from Iraq and before you found entrepreneurship, right? There's a whole yarn ball of shit that happened.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't want you to like unravel the yarn ball.
Yeah.
But that's real life, right? Like as consumers of media, right? As people who aren't veterans or aren't knee deep in the military community, right? We hear about, right? Is it 21, 22?
22. Well,
22.
They say that's actually not even
accurate,
Yeah.
but 22 vets that commit suicide daily, or we have a huge homelessness problem with a lot of vets that have come back, and mental health is a huge problem, and so you're in a very different seat today, and you're doing some amazing things, of course, with the VEA, but that yarn ball of Isaac could have went a very different way if Isaac didn't unravel it. Like what people don't hear about is that.
Yeah. No,
that gap.
Well, so whenever I talk to people about kind of where I am versus where I was, I refer to myself as a recovering dumbass because I started going in that direction, right? And like alcohol, fortunately never drugs. But alcohol was a huge problem for me, and I ended up getting myself in trouble with the law because of alcohol, and I was making all the wrong decisions. And
were you when you say you dove into alcoholism when you came back from Iraq? Were you running from something?
Absolutely, yeah.
What were you running from?
I was just trying to numb it all, right? So you get back and you've been doing this thing that just seems so important, right?
Gotcha.
You've been doing a job that's arguably one of the most important jobs that any human being could ever do.
Right.
You're defending
any American.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I went from that to working I worked in the music department at Barnes and Noble, slinging CDs, right? And finding myself wondering,
for those young adults who don't know what a CD is,
those round things that used to play music.
It's a round thing that had music on it.
Yeah.
Right after vinyl.
And so
and tape.
I found myself just wondering, like, what the hell am I doing? Like, this doesn't matter. Like, there's nothing about this matters. Like, I'm barely moving the needle for myself.
Right.
I'm definitely not moving the needle for anyone else, except for maybe a Johnny Cash fan, and I found a deep cut, right?
Right. Found the one.
So it's just that lack of purpose and mission, right? Where nothing seems to measure up. Like, nothing that you do after that, at least initially, just really feels the same or meaningful. And
so you mean like getting into coming from your purpose was to defend America, fight for the freedoms, take out terrorists, to now you're home and you're a civilian and you have to work a regular job, and that regular job doesn't amount to the same responsibilities and purpose you had serving our country and defending our freedoms against terrorists. And so now you're just in a rut trying to figure out, like, this don't mean the same.
When you come from a you knew what you were doing every day, right? I mean, obviously things happened.
People told you what you were doing
Yeah.
every day.
You
Yeah.
knew what you were going to wear. You knew where you
Yeah.
were going. You knew what you were going to eat. You knew
Yeah.
when to be there. You knew.
Yeah. Everything was scheduled out for you.
And then,
Sounds so familiar.
yeah. And then it's just this, like this, what seems in the moment is this never ending, like daily sea of like nothing.
Right.
Right. And you don't feel like you can talk to anybody about it, because as much as I had people that I loved, or that loved me, that I know now would have understood and would have been there for me, but I was so messed up that I was just like, nobody that knows and loves me and knows the old me, I should
Right.
say, would ever understand like
The-
what I've been through
Yeah.
and what I had to do while I was there, right?
Right.
So, and it's wrong.
So it was like a suffer in your own skin because they'll never understand and never be willing to help, or they just won't understand how to help.
I think that I always knew they'd be willing.
Right.
I just didn't think they would know how.
Got it.
And maybe they wouldn't, right? But just listening
Yeah.
and talking to you is
A
sometimes
shoulder
enough.
to cry on and an ear to listen.
Yeah.
Means a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that's bred into us in the military, or even just as men, right? Where it's like, men don't cry.
Yeah. Figure it out.
Soldiers drink water, rub dirt on it, and they drive on, kind
Yeah.
of thing, right? And so it's just like, I'll figure it out. I'll get through it. It sucks, but I'll get through it eventually. And for some of us, unfortunately, it's not true. And I've lost too many friends to that same struggle. I lost my best friend in the entire world in 2009. Guy that I grew up together. We grew up together. We joined the military together. We went to basic training together. We deployed together. And in 2009, he took his life because it was all too much, right?
Yeah.
And I had been there too. Like that's been on the list of options for me several times, not for a very long time,
Right.
but too many of us.
And I feel like people just would never understand. I'll go from my point of view, right, or from where I'm sitting. When you say it's all too much, right, and veterans that are going through this are like, it's all too much. I guess all too much meaning what I went through over there and what I did over there is too much of a burden to carry, and no one to hear or help me try to navigate what I did over there and kind of deal with it.
Yeah, what you did, what you saw, like in the moment, right? You're in survival
Yeah,
mode,
war mode, survival
right?
mode,
So
yeah.
every day it's just like, do what I need to do. You don't have the time to really think about it. But then when you're home, you have all the time in the world to think about it and try to come to terms
Every
with all of it.
move you made, everything you did is on replay.
Yeah.
And is that because when you're there, when you're in that moment of, and you talked about it, you clicked it on, right? Is that because your conscience turns off? And so when you come home, your conscience turns on?
I'd say, yeah.
Does that make
to some degree, yeah.
Right? So now your conscience is turned on, and now you regret the actions that you were, whether you felt forced to do or you were called to do, you regret those actions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a really great way of putting that. I pulled that out of thin air.
Good job.
Thank you, bud. So you're in Barnes & Noble's in the CD section. I never knew he worked in the CD section in Barnes & Noble's. When did the alcoholism start?
Well,
Immediate, or when
it was
you got,
happening while I was in the...
Oh, you were drinking while selling CDs?
No, it was, I mean, unfortunately, the military lifestyle
Yeah.
kind of breeds
Drinking.
the drinking.
Yeah. It's like the rugby lifestyle. Go ahead.
But then when you get home and you're alone, when it really becomes a problem is when you're just doing it to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's not a go out with the boys and have a good time. It's I'm at home and I'm down in a bottle of Jack Daniels by myself, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a Band-Aid, or I thought it was a Band-Aid, but
Right.
really all I was doing was just ripping the sore open even further.
So how did you, and this is all going to circle into the VEA and how you How did you find entrepreneurship?
So my first taste of entrepreneurship, and I've kind of shifted the way I talk about this because it really wasn't entrepreneurship, it was more intrapreneurship. Right? I got a job,
Intrapreneurship?
intrapreneurship. So
For
it's
those who don't know what that means.
so when you work for a company, but you've been given kind of that gravity to build something
Mm,
within that company.
okay.
So I got a I got a job off of
Learning today.
Craigslist actually, and I showed up for the first day, and it just seemed like I was like, man, this place is terrible. Like this is not gonna last. So I was just working. At the time, it was primarily staffed by temps, but I'd never done sales before, and it was a sales job. So I started as an appointment setter, and I crushed it. Like I was like, man, I'm really good at
Really good.
this.
I'm
Right.
really good at setting appointments.
So before too long, it was like, okay, you're an appointment setter. Well, now you're doing sales. At the time, the owners of the company were the only ones doing sales. And so it was just, I won't bore you with the details, but it was just this really quick progression from appointment setter to sales manager to let's build a sales team. And it was just, I was obsessed with it. It was unbelievable.
Right.
Like I just, it breathed new life into me, and I didn't realize it at the time. But it gave me a purpose again. Like it gave me a mission. I had something to do every single day that I felt like mattered.
Yeah.
I was leading a team,
Yeah.
and we were providing a service to small businesses. Small businesses are the backbone of everything that this thing is built on,
Yeah.
right? And so I was like, man, like I'm doing something again. This is incredible. And that's where things started lining up again. That's
Yeah.
where I started feeling like, okay,
I
things are
have
going
a
to be okay.
purpose. I have a reason.
Yeah.
Right. So with that your taste of entrepreneurship, what birthed the Veteran Entrepreneur Alliance? How did the VEA come?
So my time with that company, I always wanted to do more.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to turn kind of that skill set or that experience into finding a way to do good for the community.
Yeah.
And at someone else's company, you're not really driving the ship enough to start making those decisions. So I made the decision to go out on my own and start my own company
Right.
because I wanted to use that skill set to be an agent for change, I guess.
Yeah.
So I started my own company, started giving back to nonprofits. I started giving 10% of my revenue away to nonprofits of
That's
business
awesome.
owners' choice, right?
Yeah.
And that felt good. But through that, I started seeing some holes. And I won't say there were good, and I mean, there were some bad organizations, but I would say there were great organizations and then there were good organizations. And the great organizations wanted to lift people up and take them somewhere,
Right.
right? There weren't very many of those.
Right.
There were more organizations. They're good. They've got a good purpose. Like they're in it for the right reasons, but they're very good at directing people where to go and then saying, all right,
Hey, good luck, homie.
yeah,
Yep.
there's the finish line.
Catch you on
I
the
hope
flip
you
side.
get there.
Yeah.
And so I had this idea that entrepreneurship turned things around for me. I knew that as much as we as human beings, we want to think that we're so unique and special and everything, we're really not. I mean, in some ways,
Well,
yeah,
I am
right?
so special.
But generally, we're the same. What makes us happy makes us happy. What makes us sad makes us sad.
Not all things that drive us all, though.
Agreed. So I got this kind of harebrained idea that I wanted to start an organization. Well, at the time, it was just an event that I would hold annually where I brought a lot of really smart people together because I didn't have it figured out yet, right?
Right.
I was still making plenty of mistakes. I wanted to bring a bunch of really smart, dedicated, experienced people together to teach veterans how to start a business, or if they had already started a business, how to grow their business. So the problem was I didn't know how to put on an event. So
Great idea,
yeah.
though. Great idea.
So I went and started talking to everybody that would listen to me. that I'd met through networking for my business.
Right.
And it didn't take much time, but I eventually ended up sitting in front of her name's Karen Applegren. At the time, she worked for Zion's Bank and ran their business resource center. And I pitched the idea to her and she was on board right away. She was like, let's do it. Like,
Done.
I'll help. They
Run it.
donated the 17th floor event space to us there. She helped me bring in all of our speakers, sponsors to pay for food and all of the things that come along with an event. And we put on an all day, 100% free event for veterans.
What was the turnout?
So that first year, we had about 150 people in the room. The ratio of veteran to non-veteran was a little lacking. I had a lot of people that were there just kind of being cheerleaders. They were like, "Man, we love this. We want to be a part of it." That happened in 2018 and it was incredible. Like it went amazing. I couldn't even believe it. And so one of our main sponsors was an organization, a law firm called Perkins Coie. And one of
just
those
a little
law
just
firm.
a little
like
one.
I'll get to just how
Little
they are in a second. One of their attorneys that came and spoke at the event was a guy named Will Miller, and he was a veteran. And so he came to me afterwards and he's like, "Man, this was incredible. Have you thought about starting a nonprofit around the idea?" And I said, "I've thought about it, but it sounds expensive, and I did this for free. Like
Right.
I'm not putting
Not
any
making
money in
money
my
up,
pocket,
yeah.
right? Like I did this because I wanted to do something good." And he said, "Well, we'd like to help, right?" So um, they came on pro bono and helped us build or file all the paperwork for our nonprofit. And we we got our status. And anybody listening to this that's ever filed for a 501c3 will probably either not believe it or be extremely jealous. We got it 12 days after we filed it.
What's
I was
the normal time?
8 weeks
Oh,
is
geez.
like the short time frame for the
501c3.
yeah, the
No,
easy form. I can't remember what the form is, but so I got this thing in the mail and I called Perkins Coie and I was like, "Hey, I got this thing in the mail. I think it's like a verification that they received all the documents or something." They're like, I don't I don't think they don't do that."
Yeah.
Like they were like, "Can you tell me what it says?" And I told them, gave them the form number, and they're like, "That's your
That's your 501c3
you've
You
got
are
you are
officially a
now a
nonprofit.
nonprofit." And then for me, it was that moment. I was like, I wasn't happy. I was terrified. I was like, "Oh shit,
This is
like
real.
I'm not ready. Like I don't know what I'm doing." So what I didn't know at the time is that Perkins Coie, like I'm convinced they've got frequent flyer miles with the IRS or something because they actually incorporated Boeing. Right, they shared the
Yeah.
tower in Seattle with Boeing initially. They have had to conflict out on some stuff with me because it was a conflict of interest with Facebook. Like they set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Like they've done just incredible stuff, right?
Amazon, right? Don't
Yeah,
they? Yeah,
they
Amazon.
represent Amazon
Yeah.
too.
They're a little
Yeah, just a
law
little.
firm. Yeah.
But they've just been so great to us, and so we got our designation in 2019, and we hit the ground running. We had our second annual event. We were doing some monthly events here and there as we could, and we were rolling into 2020, guns blazing, like ready
Oh,
to go.
2020, the greatest year.
And yeah, it seems like a dream now. Just all of that like early stuff because I had such high hopes for the organization. And then to see other people kind of reflect that excitement, see it reflected in their eyes, was just, I don't need a pat on the back ever for this,
Yeah.
but that felt good
Oh,
to,
yeah.
to see it, to see them see value in what we were trying to create or what I was trying to create at the time was just, it was nuts. And so that's when I knew like
I got
we've
something
got
here.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
like something. This is gonna work.
With that being said, I want to go through some of the metrics for 2023 that you shared. So for 2023, you had $100,000 budget. Yeah. So 180 veteran businesses served, 1,543 individual counseling sessions conducted, 816 total hours of business counseling completed, 394 hours of prep time, 43 hours of travel time, 36 training events totaling 546 hours of training, 5 community events. So from 1 to 5, with a total of over 4,000 attendees.
Yeah, without having it all in front of me. Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's freaking
Now, I
amazing.
will be honest. The attendees, one of my events made up for about 1,500 of those. So, but we held the 4th of July pancake breakfast this year.
Oh,
We
yeah.
were asked to take that over. It's been going on for I've been told 40 years, and we were asked to take over that event, and one of the coolest things we've done. But
Bro, those are amazing metrics.
thank you.
For what, 2019, you became a 501c3. We're in 2023, going into 2024, and you have served so many veterans
Well, I want to do so
and
many
more.
more.
Yeah. Oh, the goal is we're getting more, right?
Yeah.
It's to continue to bless them, right? And
Yeah.
but I just think there's not enough thank yous that can be given to you for what you're doing for this community.
Well, for me, it's if I could run the VEA as a completely faceless organization and nobody ever knew that Isaac Belden did shit, I'd be fine with that. So
So crazy.
for
'Cause
me,
that's why I fell in love with you. Just real quick to interrupt. When we in 2020, when me and you when you couldn't do the VEA thing because right, lockdowns, and you and I kind of went on our own little entrepreneur journey together. That was one of the things that you said to me that was like, bro, I don't ever want anything from this. I just want to continue to bless the community. If I could put myself in a position to where one of my entrepreneur, right, jobs or companies takes off and I don't have to take money from this, I don't want to.
yeah.
I want to continue to just keep growing the VEA and blessing the community. There's not a lot of people in the nonprofit business that I've met that don't want no money from it. They just, right, a lot of them want to get into it and get paid from it. And you hear a lot about that all the time with nonprofits. And I love that about you, is that this is bigger than you, right? Being able to create a purpose for veterans that starts with entrepreneurship, that gives them guidance in creating a foundation for them, for their families, which then creates the ripple effect, right, for the future. That's freaking amazing, bro. And I'm super proud of you for that amazing accomplishment.
Well, I tell people that I'm one thing I do want to clarify, just for transparency's sake, a really great grant that we were given actually afforded me the opportunity to step into VEA as a paid employee. However, nobody's getting rich, so stepping away from business is a sacrifice, right?
100%.
The business made a lot more money than what the nonprofit pays me, but what I lack in personal gain, I make up for, and it sounds cheesy, right? But it feeds my soul, right? And as long as we're doing well enough that my wife and my kid are taken care of, like, then I've got enough, right? And anybody that goes into the nonprofit game thinking that they're going to get rich, they're not doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah. Anyways.
Now, it's not easy, right? I mean, a lot of people think, well, you're out here working with veterans and you're putting on these events and everything. It sounds like a good time. It's a pain in the ass. Like, it really is. Like, but I love it.
Yeah.
I've never, with the exception of my daughter, I've never loved a pain in the ass more.
Yeah.
So,
Clip that.
yeah. um, into that point, right? Family family always needs to come first. And one thing we didn't touch on is the VEA for anybody that's watching this that has watched the VEA's trajectory, right? We were crushing it.
Yeah.
2019 going into 2020, COVID beat us up. I still kept trying to do it for a while, but it was coming out of COVID, and I always start by saying she beat it. My daughter was diagnosed
Yeah.
with stage 4 cancer, and that is the only thing in this journey that ever made me kind of hang it up,
Yeah.
right? So we hung it up for a while, and so this kind of this and she
Rebirth.
this rebirth of the VEA has been even more meaningful because even though I was still taking phone calls, right? If somebody really needed something, like I tried, but I was living in a hospital
Yeah.
for most of the 18 months that she was being treated.
Yeah.
So, this kind of rebirth of the VEA and that grant coming in at just the right time and the support of you guys that you guys have thrown our way
Of course.
has just made this all the more meaningful because that's where it could have stopped.
Yeah, I could have died right
It
there.
could have died right there, and I would have gone back to the whole corporate America thing and like trying to build something or going to work for somebody else. But call it fate, whatever you want to call it. I was able to pick that torch up and keep on going.
Yep.
And now we've hit this stride where the sky's the limit.
Yep.
Like we're partnering and we're doing all of these things that just the future of VEA looks so incredibly bright right now that like I I don't even know how to put it into words, right? Like to be able to do what I do and give people that
Man.
next path, that next drive, like that ability to believe that one more day is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It's everything,
I'm
bro.
lucky.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Well, you've to come out of, and you're right. We didn't even touch on being a dad, right, during this process, and your daughter, and so, which we don't need to touch on, but she is, she's doing amazing, cheerleader,
Crushing it.
With all that being said, and now VEA is coming out on the other side of this. The torch is brighter. What is the best advice that you could give to a veteran that's seeking purpose, right?
Don't buy into the hype.
Ooh,
Don't buy
all right.
into the way that we've been programmed as these machines, right? There's a reason, there's a method to that madness, right? There's a reason why your military service requires you to be broken down and built into this emotionless like
Yeah, soldier
thing,
Yeah,
right? Because most of when you're deployed anyways, it's pretty likely you're going to end up in a life or death situation. And you need to be able to. I just talked on a panel yesterday about leadership. The military leads with fear because they know that if you're put into a situation where you're afraid, you're either going to do it or you're not, right? And most are going to do it. Self-preservation is going to kick in and they're going to do it.
survival.
Now, if you don't lead that way, it's more of a, well, I'll get around to it, right? So if they train you that way, when you're put in those situations, you're going to get things done. Now, coming into the civilian world, you can't lead people that way.
No.
You gotta, I mean, it's all fun sometimes, but you gotta try to work
I feel like that's
work
what
back
I feel like
into.
that's what we incarcerate people, by leading with fear.
Yeah. Amen.
Listen, brother, I am so grateful that you came in and
Yeah.
spoke about the VEA. We're super fans here at Rhino Rush, of course. We're big.
Yeah, it's on the bottle.
We're big donors. For those, go pick yourself up on Rhino Rush. VEA is on the bottle. Rhino Rush is a huge supporter of Veterans Entrepreneurs Alliance. We are super happy to be able to help vets move on and find new purpose in their lives. Thank you so much, brother, for being on the show. For those that want more information, please go visit vealliance.org.
.com.
.com
Or org. It
or
goes
org.
the same place.
Go like and subscribe on our YouTube, Drip Drop Distro Studios, and we are super grateful for y'all. Deuces.